Hi, Math to Enhance. This is page 85 of our workbook. This is Unit 1, Lesson 12, Notes. And this set of notes is on translations. So if I could slide my paper down. We are doing translations on blank paper, which means for this lesson today, make sure you have your protractor, straight edge, and your compass handy to do these translations. So let's first look at the diagram that we're given on our page. We have a blue triangle, CDE, and why don't we mark this orange triangle, C prime, D prime, E prime. What's been done here is that triangle CDE has been translated along the directed line segment V. So this is a little arrow that's above V. This is my directed line segment V right here, and it's telling me the distance and the direction. So if you can imagine, this has a distance from the end of the vector to the front. It's a directed line segment in our workbook, but I'm used to calling these vectors. So sometimes you might hear me say the word vector by accident. This directed line segment from the end to the front has a distance and it has a direction that it headed. You can tell that its direction from where the arrow is. So each one of these points, C, D, and E, was moved this distance and this direction to C prime, D prime, E prime. Let's connect C to C prime. And when you get done doing that, connect D to D prime and do the same for E to E prime. You'll notice each one of the segments that you drew has the same length and the same direction as my vector, my directed line segment V. Let's put a parallel symbol and also a congruent symbol. The arrow shows that it's parallel, the tick mark showing that it's the exact same length. So when each of these points are moved this distance and direction, I've moved my entire blue triangle to the orange triangle. And each of the sides of my triangle were also moved that same distance and direction. And if you look at CD, let's mark it with two arrows. If you look at CD, it is parallel to C prime, D prime. Let's take a look at DE. DE is the same distance and is also parallel to D prime, E prime. Let's mark that with three arrows. And finally, let's look at CE. CE is the same distance as C prime, E prime, but I'd also like you to notice that CE is parallel to C prime, E prime. Let's mark that with four arrows. When we do a translation, we move lines to parallel lines. And this is what we mean. We move this line to this line, and they're parallel. So translations move lines to parallel lines or itself. And we'll talk about that in another activity. So translation moves a line to a parallel line. So let's do a translation. To be given a translation, I would have to give you a shape to translate. We're going to do a triangle in our case. So just move to the bottom half of your page. On the bottom half of your page, let's draw a triangle. It doesn't have to be any particular type of triangle. It can actually be any triangle you want. So let's take a moment to draw a triangle. And when you've got done drawing your triangle, label the three vertices A, B, C. So I have A, I have B, and we have C. Now, in order to translate it, I need to know what direction and how the distance to go. So I need my directed line segment. So just like V above, let's draw a directed line segment. We'll call it U. Somewhere close to C, just draw, I don't know, maybe an inch, inch and a half long, and put an arrow on it. And we'll call this U. So U is going to be the distance and direction. That's my directed line segment. That I'm going to move my A, B, and C. Oh, I noticed I have A, C, and C. Why don't I make this bottom one? I'm going to make this bottom one B. There we go. Sorry about that. So we have 3 steps to do this. Our first step is that we're going to measure from A to the back of the vector, that directed line segment, directed line segment U. Once you measure, I need to scoot this over, sorry, line segment U. Once you've measured that, we're going to go mark it at the front of the vector. And mark, I'm going to say arc this distance at the front of the directed line segment U. So I'm going to just say in the front of U instead of writing directed line segment over and over again. So what does that look like to do that? So put your pointer on the end of your directed line segment. So the back is going to be, so the front will be where the arrow is. So the back will be where the arrow is not. Put your pointer there and then put your pencil lead on A. This is me measuring how far A is from the back of my directed line segment. And I'm going to go arc this at the front. So let's go put our pointer on the front. Let's put our pointer on the arrow. And I'm now going to arc this distance. This is what's going to make my line segments look parallel. This making sure that A is the same distance from the back that it is the front. So this entire arc, every point on this arc is this exact distance away from the front of the vector. So that's giving me my direction. Now I need the distance. Well, this is the distance of U. I'm going to measure that distance. So I am going to measure the distance of my directed line segment U and arc this distance from point A. So what does that look like? Move my notes up for you to see a little bit. So I measure how long U is. So I put my pointer at the end and my pencil at the front, and I measure from the end to the arrow. And when I've done that, I'm going to go mark this or arc this distance at A. So I'm going to put my pointer on A, and I'm going to arc this distance. Every single point on this arc is U units away from A. Where my direction arc and this new distance arc, because my directed line segment U has distance and direction, where these two arcs intersected is A prime. Mark the intersection of the arcs A prime. If your arcs didn't intersect, like if your first arc stopped up here, you just need to go back and make it longer. So I would advise you to make very big arcs so that you don't have to go back and try to make your arc longer so that they intersect. So this is my A prime. I'm now going to do the same thing for B and C. I'm just going to change everywhere in my directions I have an A, I'm going to change it to a B. So let's measure from B to the back of the vector, the directed line segment. And so this is a really tiny distance. Let me make my compass much smaller. I'm going to put my arrow on the back of my vector, and I'm going to put my pencil on B. That's how far B is from the back of my directed line segment U. So now I'm going to move my pointer to the front, and I'm going to mark that arc nice and big. And B prime is somewhere on that arc. B prime is the same distance from the front that B was to the back. So now step 2, we're going to measure the distance of our directed line segment U. And we're going to see how far this is. And this is how far apart B and B prime is. So I'm going to go put my pointer on B, and I'm going to mark this arc. And that is how far B prime should be from B. Now, if your arcs don't intersect, again, you're going to have to go back and make the first one longer, for instance. And so when you get done doing that, mark the intersection, and that's my B prime. Let's do it all over again for C. So my first arc, I'm going to measure from C to the back of the directed line segment U. So let's put my pointer on the back of U, and let's measure from the back of my directed line segment to C. That's how far C is from the back of U. That's the exact same distance C prime will be from the front. So let's go to the front, put my pointer on the arrow, and mark that arc. Make it nice and big. My C prime is somewhere on that arc. So step 2, measure the distance of my directed line segment U and arc this distance from point C. So I'm going to measure how long U is from the back to the front arrow. And I'm going to go put my pointer on C, and I'm going to mark this arc. Where this arc for the distance intersects my first arc for the direction is my C prime. So now let's join A, B, and C, A prime, B prime, and C prime. And this would be my image, A prime, B prime, and C prime. And it's this triangle that has been translated this distance in this direction that's shown to you by the directed line segment U. Notice AC and A prime C prime are parallel. Notice that AB and A prime B prime are parallel. Notice that CB and C prime B prime are parallel. Notice too that they're the same length. So my translation had both distance and direction. That's why I needed the 2 arcs to be able to find my A prime, B prime, and C prime. If you were in the classroom, we would now practice this using different triangles along with different directed line segments. So take a moment on your own paper and draw another triangle. And again, make it look different than the last one so that you're getting to try different triangles, and add a vector. Remember, it's distance and direction. You can even try going down if you would like, or up to the left or something like that. And so now you're going to do all those steps again, those steps where you measure from the back and you arc at the front, then you measure your vector and you mark at the point. And you're going to find this entire triangle will shift forward this distance in this direction. Good luck, and I'll see you back in the classroom.